Manaroth the Destructor. 3 years before the Dark Portal. Kil'jaeden was pleased with the Horde's victory, despite Velen's escape. He would have preferred to see the Prophet dead. Better yet, he would have preferred to see Velen captured, so that the Demon Lord himself could humiliate and torture him. But it was only a matter of time before the Prophet met his end. Of greater concern to Kil'jaeden was the task of conquering Shattrath. The Horde had seized Karabor, but only by harnessing the Dark Star's power. That was a trick they couldn't use again. Moreover, the warlock technique of infusing young orcs with fel magic to make them more powerful was not as promising as it once seemed. Kil'jaeden knew that Gul'dan and his followers needed something more, something greater, if they were to take Shattrath. Gul'dan and his warlocks had previously empowered their kin with fel energies, but this process only granted them limited strength. Drinking the blood of a demon was a far superior method that would give the orcs otherworldly power. This act would also complete their corruption and shackle them to the Burning Legion's will forever. Kil'jaeden revealed these plans to Gul'dan, reminding him of the power he would be granted if he continued loyally serving the Demon Lord. The warlock had not forgotten that promise. Orchestrating the corruption of his race was a small price to pay for godhood. Gul'dan convinced Blackhand to arrange a gathering of the clans atop a mountain near the citadel where he would empower the orcs. He never told Blackhand what the source of this power would be. He told him only that he had discovered a new way of wielding fel magic. As Blackhand ordered the clans to assemble, Kil'jaeden called upon his great power and opened a temporary gateway to the Black Temple. Through it, a pit lord known as Manaroth the Destructor emerged. This monstrous horned demon was one of the Legion's greatest generals, and he had led countless assaults against its enemies. Manaroth radiated a power and malevolence that Gul'dan had never experienced. Even the warlock, who feared little, cowered in the demon's presence. Gul'dan went to great lengths to keep Manaroth a secret, informing only his most trusted Shadow Council warlocks of the demon and the reason for his appearance on Draenor. Yet, Ner'zhul learned the truth. In their arrogance, Gul'dan and his Shadow Council had often kept the Elder Shaman close by so that he could witness the gradual corruption of his race. They believed he was too broken and cowardly to ever act on what he saw. They were wrong. Ner'zhul had spent years lost in the depths of self-loathing and regret, but when he discovered the plans to have orcs drink demon blood, something changed. If he didn't act, he knew that his entire race would be doomed. Ner'zhul mustered his courage and set out to warn someone about Gul'dan's intentions. He was aware that most of the orc chieftains would ignore his words. They were too loyal to Blackhand and the Horde, too drunk in the intoxicating might of fel power. However, there was one who was not like the others, Chieftain Durotan. He'd become increasingly reluctant to wage war against the Draenei, and this news had reached Ner'zhul. If there was anyone who would heed the shaman's warning, it was the Frostwolf's noble leader. As Gul'dan and his warlocks prepared for the meeting of the orcs, Ner'zhul planted an anonymous missive to Durotan among the Shadow Council orders that were bound to the Frostwolf clan. In the message, he urged the chieftain to not follow Gul'dan's command at the upcoming gathering, or Durotan and his people would suffer a fate worse than death. The Shadow Council would never know of Ner'zhul's actions. Shackles of Servitude. Atop the mountain that loomed near the citadel, Gul'dan addressed the gathered chieftains. He unveiled a pool of Manaroth's smoldering blood, but it did not reveal its true source. Gul'dan simply announced that the green liquid was a gift from the gracious being who had taught the orcs fel magic. Now, these same benefactors wanted to give the clan something more. By drinking from the pool, the orcs would be granted a strength akin to that of gods. Gul'dan challenged the chieftains to accept this gift, and Grommash Hellscream was the first to step forward. Always one to show his fearlessness, the Warsong chieftain drank deep of Manaroth's blood. A hush fell over the orc at what happened next. Grommash grew taller, and his muscles bulged as power flooded his veins. A hellish red glow blazed bright in his eyes. With a mighty war cry, the Warsong chieftain howled for the blood of the Draenei. The other orcs in attendance would not be denied this power. Nearly all clamored to drink and experience the rush of might that Grommash had. Only a few would hold back, including Orgrim Doomhammer and Chieftain Duratan. Duratan had received Ner'zhul's anonymous missive, and he had taken the warning to heart. Knowing that speaking out against the Horde at this time would mean death, he stayed silent. Yet he would not allow his clan to partake of Gul'dan's gift under any circumstances. Duratan simply refused to drink, claiming it was his choice to make. This act of defiance infuriated Gul'dan. He was already suspicious of the Frostwolf chieftain. Now, he wondered if Duratan had discovered something about the Burning Legion and its plans to enslave the orcs. Gul'dan's patience with Duratan was wearing thin, but with the assault on Shattrath approaching, he could not afford killing the chieftain and upsetting the Frostwolves. Orgrim also rejected the offer to drink. Much like Duratan, he'd grown concerned with the Horde's bloodthirsty nature and its rampant use of fel energy. The Blackrock warrior had looked on with horror as the magic dried up Draenor's pristine rivers and killed its beautiful forests. Deep down, Orgrim knew that something was amiss with Gul'dan's gift. To avoid drawing suspicion, Orgrim claimed that he was not worthy to drink from the same cup that Blackhand had. After all, he was but a servant of the war chief. Orgrim's plan worked. Both Gul'dan and Blackhand saw his refusal to drink as a sign of servitude. The orcs who drank Manaroth's blood reveled in power as their bodies twisted and swelled with might. All hesitation, fear, and uncertainty faded from their minds. These same effects would gradually spread throughout the rest of the Horde. Though not every orc had drunk Manaroth's blood, those who had would radiate an invisible aura of fel energy. It would slowly seep into the skin and bones of nearby orcs. Eventually even Duratan, Orgrim, and others who had not tasted demon blood would find their skin turning completely green. At the gathering place, the orcs who had consumed Manaroth's blood beat their chests and screamed for the heads of Draenei. Warchief Blackhand would give them what they wanted. That very night, he ordered the Horde to march on Shattrath City en masse. The orcs set out, and Gul'dan infused the mountain at their backs with fel energy. The earth groaned and split, and gouts of fire erupted from the ground. Gul'dan claimed it was a sign of their impending victory, just as the erupting volcano had heralded their conquest of Karabor. The sight of the trembling mountain filled the orcs with unbridled courage. In time, this broken mountain would become known as the throne of Kil'jaeden. The Siege of Shattrath. Shattrath was doomed. Velen had foreseen it. In the weeks after Karabor's fall, the prophet had suffered from visions of apocalypse. He had seen a blood-red sky over Shattrath, weeping poison that twisted his people into monsters. He had seen thousands of brave Draenei males, females, and children cut to pieces by the orcs. And he had seen Shattrath, their beloved refuge, consumed in a roaring inferno of felfire. Though Velen still questioned the certainty of his visions, he could not take any chances. The Draenei could not hold Shattrath forever, that much was clear. At first, Velen called for the full evacuation of Shattrath, but that would only momentarily forestall the Horde. The orcs would continue hunting the Draenei until they were sure they destroyed them all. Velen and his followers agreed to another plan. Many of the Draenei civilians would flee to safety, but the bulk of their military would remain in Shattrath. They would sacrifice their lives to make the Horde believe they had destroyed them. it was a terrible burden to place upon Shattrath's defenders, but the Draenei didn't shy away from this duty. Velen vowed to be one of these defenders. He had abandoned Karabor to the Horde, and he would not do the same to Shattrath. He would die protecting the city if need be. The Exarchs argued against this. In their hearts, they knew Shattrath was doomed to fall. If their race had any hope of survival, it would be under Velen's wise leadership. After a full day of heated discussion, they finally persuaded the Prophet to leave Shattrath. While the clans were setting out from the throne of Kil'jaeden, Velen and the Exarchs made their preparations. The Prophet led many civilians to Tel'Redor, a remote temple built upon an island in the Sangar Sea. Meanwhile, Rengari scouts harassed the Horde lines, slowing their approach. In Shattrath itself, the Vindicators shored up their defenses. As the clans approached Shattrath, Kil'jaeden's ethereal form appeared before them. He no longer saw the need to stay hidden, now that the orcs had shackled their souls to the Legion. Kil'jaeden revealed himself as one of the benefactors who had gifted the orcs with fel magic and other powers. To help them crush the Draenei and topple their stronghold, he would once again give them weapons. He granted knowledge of new destructive spells to the warlocks, spells that would drive fear into the enemy's hearts. Meanwhile, Gul'dan unveiled a devious weapon his Shadow Council had crafted for the siege. The warlocks had melded their magics with the Red Pox and created a volatile convocation that would spread the plague to the Draenei. The Shadow Council loaded the mixture into crude bombs, which were then lobbed against Shattrath by siege engines. The bombs exploded against Shattrath's walls and released a foul mist that burned the Draenei's skin and choked the breath from their lungs. A thick red fog enveloped Shattrath's battlements and shrouded the approaching Horde army from sight. As the mist wreaked havoc among Shattrath's defenders, the orcs flooded through breaches in the city walls. Using the spells Kil'jaeden had taught them, warlocks summoned fiery green meteors from the heavens and sent them crashing against Shattrath's ramparts. These smoldering rocks arose as enormous demons known as Infernals. Marad, Akama, Nobundu, and thousands of Shattrath's other defenders stood firm against the Horde's onslaught. They knew they were doomed, and their only wish was to take as many orcs as they could with them. Amid the brutal fighting, the remaining Draenei refugees scrambled to flee from the city. Some of these groups were led by Marad and his fellow Vindicators. Though the Holy Warriors did not wish to flee the fighting, they knew the importance of saving innocents. Many of the Vindicators did not succeed. Rivers of blood flowed through Shattrath's streets, temples, and courtyards. No one was spared from the marauding Horde. It was not long before Shattrath fell. Many of the Horde's soldiers lay dead alongside the slain Draenei. It had been the orcs' costliest battle yet, but they had won. Despite the victory, Gul'dan was troubled. Velen had once again escaped. The warlock feared that Kil'jaeden would be furious about this development. Gul'dan had not yet been contacted by the Demon Lord, and he hoped to track down the Prophet before he was. He immediately dispatched Garona to hunt for Velen, and the Shadow Council assassin committed herself to the task. She would spend years scouring Draenor in search of the Prophet, but she would never find him. The destruction of Auchindoun. Thousands of Draenei perished in Shattrath, but their sacrifices had allowed many civilians to escape. A number of Vindicators, priests, and Rengari also survived the initial attack. They retreated to the tomb city of Auchindoun in hopes of defending it from the Horde. Auchindoun was the holiest Draenei site in the world, and these defenders could not bear the thought of the orcs desecrating their ancestors or the Naru housed within. Exarch Smaladar organized the military forces that came to Auchindoun. They fortified the tomb city's catacombs and awaited the inevitable Horde attack. Gul'dan knew of the Draenei presence in Auchindoun, and he feared that they might call upon the spirits of their ancestors who waged war against the Horde. the Warlock dispatched Taron Gore and his most powerful Shadow Council agents to prevent this from happening. Taron Gore and the other Warlocks stormed Auchindoun and met fierce resistance from the tomb's defenders. Though the Warlock's power were mighty, so were the Draenei's light-given abilities. Meladar and his followers also received aid from Auchindoun's spirits. The Draenei and their ancestors slaughtered many of the Shadow Council's agents. Victory was slipping through the Shadow Council's grasp. As Meladar and his forces closed in, Taron Gore called upon his remaining allies. Using the new knowledge Kil'jaeden had shared with them, the Warlocks pooled their powers and reached beyond the veil of reality. They hoped to summon a powerful demon into the world, one that would strike down their enemies. In their wild desperation, the Warlocks summoned something far different. An otherworldly elemental creature known as Murmur materialized within Auchindoun, pulled to Draenor from a distant corner of the universe. The shockwave of its arrival ripped the earth asunder, killing many of the Draenei and blasting apart the tomb city. Murmur's destructive energies rolled out from Auchindoun in waves and leveled the surrounding forests. Exarch Meladar and a handful of his Draenei used their magics to shield themselves from the blast. Though they survived, they no longer had the numbers to resist the Shadow Council. Taron Gore and his warlocks overwhelmed the Draenei and bound them in chains. The Shadow Council then contained Murmur deep within Auchindoun. A few warlocks stayed in the tomb city to keep the creature from getting loose and wreak havoc on the Horde. In the years that followed, the charred, lifeless land around Auchindoun would become known as the Bone Wastes. It would serve as a bitter reminder of all that the Draenei had lost.